Hello everyone, my name is Katrina Lye and I will be sharing with you the research that I conducted on how educators, parents, and caregivers think about early literacy and if there's a connection between language impairments and reading delays. The purpose of my study. Reading opens so many doors. Imagine not being able to reach that door or even having the tools to know how to turn the door handle. This is the case for many children. More than 1 million children in Canada are estimated to have below grade level reading skills, according to Literacy Matters 2022. My son is one of those children. The purpose of this study is to first examine if there is a correlation between children who have speech and language impairments and reading delays. I will be observing numerous factors that can contribute to reading delays by combining different papers and resources. The second goal of this research is to provide educators and caregivers with the proper indicators, tools, and strategies to help those children who do have a strong correlation between speech and language delays and reading delays. I will be examining literature and research articles on what the possible causes of a reading delay are and what can be done to help those causes. I will be creating a handbook that will be a resource for families and educators to use when looking at contributing factors for reading delays, what early interventions could look like, and the importance of resources. What is literacy? Literacy is more than just reading and writing. It is the pillar of learning and growth. Developing literacy skills is an imperative skill that children need to achieve their goals in formal education and in life. According to the Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation 2023, reading teaches children empathy by providing them with a window into the thoughts and emotions of others. Literacy also teaches children communication skills as well as emotional and social resiliency. Early literacy is imperative, particularly in the early years, because research suggests that a child's brain is almost fully developed by the age of 5. 27% of kids start grade 1 without some of the early developmental skills they need to be able to learn to read. For this study, I relied on one theoretical study and had another present itself as the research developed. The first theory that best supports this research is Jean Piaget's theory of language. His theory of language focuses on the cognitive development of children. His research provides insight into the cognitive process during childhood. It is based on the premise that as children grow, adequate environmental enticement and experiences are needed for cognitive growth and language learning. Piaget believed that learning happened through two operations. The first one is assimilation, which is when new information is incorporated into previous knowledge. The second operation is accommodation. Accommodation is when we modify what we already know so new information becomes a better fit. These operations are known as schemas. Schemas are a mental structure that helps organize and interpret information around us. Piaget's theory suggests that children learn best by doing and exploring things for themselves using their senses. This connects to my research because Piaget suggests that children begin to learn through collecting sensory and motor information and gradually organize that knowledge into symbolic thoughts and critical thinking. This relates to how children begin to develop their reading skills because reading involves the ability to translate sounds into letters using symbolic thoughts as well as the abstract mind to translate words into concepts. Nearing the age of 2, children are beginning to recall, label, and store information that they are taught. This emphasizes the impact of early literacy on a child's ability to develop their reading skills. A child with less exposure to sounds, vocabulary, and books has a greater risk for developing reading and/or speech language delays. As my research developed, another theory presented itself, Urie Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. His theory believes that children's environment and their relationships with their surroundings play a significant role in how they developed. This will be discussed later in my research. Important literature on this topic. The first source that I found very resourceful was an article titled Speech Production Deficits in Early Readers, Predictors of Risk by Roy and Main, 2011. Roy and Main conducted a study on children aged 5. The study looked to find if speech production abilities and phonological awareness skills are linked to children just learning to read. Using a diverse sample, they explored expressive phonological skills at the beginning and end of kindergarten with 92 5-year-olds. It was found that children who made more speech errors had significant early reading deficits. The children who made more atypical speech errors made more reading inaccuracies. Those children who had no speech errors at the beginning of the year had supreme early reading skills. The research showed indicators of a possible concern have been seen as early as kindergarten. Beatty and Pratt's Early Literacy in Preschool and Kindergarten is a great resource for educators and parents and caregivers of young children. Family involvement plays a large factor in a child's speech capability, which then leads to reading preparedness. Family literacy involvement and their child's views and attitudes about reading are related. The two correlate and have a strong foundation provides the children with access to outside resources at an early age. Reading to children at both home and at school is essential to the child's later success in learning to read. A key point that Beatty and Pratt 2017 discusses is that family want to feel valued and feel like they are doing a good job. The family's past experience with school and reading can be deflected onto the child because that experience is all the family knows. The last resource I'd like to share is the Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation. Their website has an abundance of knowledge. It has eye-opening facts about literacy and various programs with additional resources and tips. Their website can also help parents or caregivers if they are feeling concerned for their children and their developing reading skills. For the purpose of this study, I decided to use a qualitative deductive content analysis method that addressed the overall research questions. I've collected information from 12 peer-reviewed articles and numerous academic websites and checklists. I have decided to use a handbook option to present the information that was collected. It will be used with suggested steps to help educators and caregivers learn from and refer to when identifying possible early literacy delays and how to implement intervention, along with further resources that can be used. So what did I find? Some themes were identified in searching for an answer if there is a correlation between children with poor or weak language skills. My findings did show that there was, in fact, a correlation between speech and language impairments and reading delays, but it also highlighted that there is a key element that outweighed all other contributing factors, which was family involvement. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services 2020, the most well-known reading disorder is dyslexia. It primarily inhibits one's ability to read. People with dyslexia have adequate intelligence, but they read at a far lower level than predicted. Although the disorder differs from person to person, the following traits are shared. Individuals with dyslexia frequently struggle with sounding out words, interpreting written words, and quickly naming items. According to the International Dyslexia Association, 15 to 20% of the population has a language-based learning disability. Although every child learns at their own pace, a child who is struggling with reading and spelling may be suffering from dyslexia. Dyslexia symptoms and indicators can be present as early as preschool. The National Institute of Health has discovered that dyslexia can be detected with 92% accuracy as early as age 5.5, but the lack of awareness of dyslexia in Canada sadly means that children are getting undiagnosed. Due to the lack of diagnosis, children are not receiving the resources and interventions they need and deserve. Below average language skills in preschool place a child at a risk for deficits in pre-literacy skills which may have implications for their later development of a reading disability. The research pointed to connections between children's speech and language impairments and their reading abilities. Speech difficulties may be an early marker for reading delays. Children experiencing disordered speech faults are more likely to have deficiencies in how they represent the phonology of recognized words and are more likely to have reading problems because their phonological awareness skills are affected. Abnormalities or speech sound disorders are common in early childhood. Children with these disorders may struggle with reading because they have weak auditory, phonological, and verbal memory skills. Studies have been conducted with kindergarten-age children to find if speech production abilities and phonological awareness skills are linked to children just learning to read. It was concluded that children who made more speech errors had significantly early reading deficits. The children who made more atypical speech errors made more reading inaccuracies. Those children who had no speech errors at the beginning of the year had supreme early reading skills. Other studies have shown that children with the presence of a speech sound disorder had a small but substantial risk of poor phonemic and spelling skills. Beyond the domain of speech, the existence of a co-occurring language impairment was substantially predictive of literacy skills. Parental caregiver involvement is a large contributor to early literacy skills. A child's brain develops 3 times quicker between birth and age 3 than at any other age. A child's exposure to language and sounds during that critical phonological period of their development is the most important. By the age of 5, it is estimated that children who are read to at least once a day will hear 290,000 more words compared to those children who aren't read to by parents or caregivers. The lack of engagement with a child since birth can have a significant impact on a child's ability to gain pre-reading skills and develop their future reading abilities. Research suggests that 90% of a child's brain is developed by age 5, before many children have access to formal education. This leads to why parental and caregiver involvement is so imperative to children. Participation in reading engagements at home has remarkable positive impacts not only on reading accomplishment, language comprehension, and expressive articulation skills, but also on children's interest in reading, attitudes towards reading, and attentiveness in the classroom. Furthermore, reading has been determined to be the most vulnerable influence of any school subject. In turn, success in reading opens the door in other academic disciplines. Although parental participation has the biggest impact in the early years, its influence on children's educational and literacy outcomes extends throughout the adolescent and even adult years. It is therefore critical that parents and caregivers are aware of the significant contribution they make to their children's learning by providing a stimulating environment focused on language, reading, and writing. Discussion. What does this all mean? The study aimed to investigate if there was a strong correlation between children with speech and language impairments and reading delays. The results of the study concluded that there is a modest correlation between speaking and reading skills, but that a much larger variable plays a greater contributing factor. That element is the child's subjection to language from a young age. The child's environment outshone all other contributing aspects. Research demonstrated how vital early intervention is for our youngest learners. Literacy development is more about windows of opportunity that extend throughout early life, potentially peaking around the age of 10. Kindergarten and first grade are regarded as the window of opportunity for preventing long-term reading difficulties. Without early help, the reading gap between struggling readers and their peers grows. Throughout this study, it became evident that much of the literature and research found parental involvement, home environment to be the greatest impactor on a child's ability to develop reading skills. The studies showed that children today are not receiving the same exposure to language and reading, and that it is impacting their skills once entering preschool and elementary school. As a result, early intervention is so imperative for these children. Highlighting the importance of reading with their children to parents and caregivers is a key message that was taken away from my research. The correlation between speech impairments and reading delays aligns with Bronfenbrenner's theory again because if children are not exposed to the language and phonological sounds during their critical period for language development, then it makes it more challenging to advance those skills. Recommendations for caregivers and educators. Reading daily with a child results in that child hearing 296,660 words. A child who has read 5 books a day will hear an astonishing 1,483,300 words by the age of 5. This is why reading is so crucial for language exposure, even for older children. Play with sounds. When learning to read, you must be capable of connecting sounds to letters in order to sound out your first words. Phonics can be especially difficult in a language like English, where several letters might represent the same sound. Singing songs such as Old MacDonald Had a Farm are an excellent for practicing sound recognition. When children are exposed to enough print, they will eventually recognize common patterns such as the letters of the alphabet. Furthermore, children learn by looking at shapes, playing with puzzles, discussing various forms, and studying the pages of books when their parents read to them. Creating a word of the day routine can be a fun and fulfilling exercise. Introduce a new word every day. It doesn't have to be long or hard, and explain its meaning before implementing it into your day. All of these activities should be enjoyable and low pressure to avoid overwhelming or turning your child away from wanting to read. In conclusion, literacy includes more than simply reading and writing. It serves as the foundation for our learning and growth. Developing children's literacy skills is one of the most effective methods to guarantee they reach their full potential in school and life. Literacy provides the door to comprehension, empathy, critical thinking, and the ability to learn for life. But far too many Canadian children are being left behind. There are many contributing factors to a child's delay in reading abilities. The research shows that having a neurological disability is understandably an uncontrolled element. Outside genetic makeup, it has been proven that there is a relationship between a child's speech and language abilities and early family interactions. Both components go hand in hand, but the greatest element to a child's learning to read is the amount of engagement they receive during those crucial years from birth to 5. The benefits of reading in childhood are universal, regardless of where you live. Books have the power to take us to faraway places where we can be superheroes or dinosaurs. There are no limits where the imagination can take us.